The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Oh, what is going on, sports fans?
Yeah,
Lance
what is
Phillips,
going on?
Joshua, what was going on there?
I don't know.
That was messy.
That was messy. It's messier than my voice sounds right now.
That is messy, too.
Yeah.
This is The Gloves Are Off, and we have a show coming up for you.
Quite the show.
Yes. Aussie Open, Scott Milanovic, NHL All-Star Game, Lloydminster Bobcats, and we have a Super Bowl prediction or two happening. First, let's get started with the Aussie Open. Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer engaged in what could be the last match, finals match between the two that we may see in our lifetime, and it was an epic 5-set final where Federer came away the Aussie Open champion. What can you say? What can you say?
What can you say? I didn't get to watch it live. Unfortunately, I had to watch it the next day on replay because of getting up for work, but I talked to many people who did get to see it live, and I tell you, it was just like a classic from the 2008 Wimbledon final, the 2009 Wimbledon. Finally, Roger Federer, after a big losing streak against Nadal in big matches, finally getting that win. And vintage of both guys, Nadal just running back and forth from pin to pin on the court and showing that speed and versatility he had before. And Federer really showing his backhand at position at a level he's never actually shown. That was one thing that was new, is we're used to great forehands from him, great net play, consistent serving. But sometimes he struggles a little bit on the backhand side, and that was a big thing that Nadal always used against him. This time Federer, just some of those cross-court backhands were so clean cut. And it was great, as you said before, you know, both guys were seeded low, both of them finishing seeded outside the top 5, and yet they were both able to make their way down to the final and give us, you know, maybe one last great hurrah of those two players.
Maybe one last? I think we saw the last. I don't know if we'll see that again in our lifetime. That was incredible. And let's get right to it. That's his 18th Grand Slam win, the most all-time. Yeah. Is he the GOAT?
Well, you can make the argument for Nadal still just based on sample size from winning percentage. Nadal still owns the head-to-head between the two players, and Nadal certainly won 9 French Open titles. That's unbelievable, right? You could also make the argument for Rod Laver, who completed the seasonal Grand Slam, and Novak Djokovic. When all things are all said and done, he's at 12. He's still relatively healthy. He's a few years younger than them. He has time to make his way back in that conversation. So I think for now you can say yes, Federer is the greatest of all time, but as you just said before, this might be the last time we see these two. They didn't have to play Murray or Djokovic on the way to the final. Raonic, an injured quad.
May have got away with one there.
May have, you know, they got very fortunate in being able to have this matchup. I don't know if we'll see either of them in a final again necessarily, if Murray and Djokovic are healthy and playing well.
Well, and especially together.
Yes.
Together. In a final together. I mean, that is just not going to happen. I mean, to make another case for Federer, he's spent pretty much 4 years at the top of the rankings, the #1 seed for essentially 4 years. I mean, that is an incredible run. It's an incredible run, and I don't know that we're going to see another guy quite like him for some time.
We may not. I do wonder if Djokovic can put together enough majors to where we put them in the conversation, certainly because Djokovic, I mean, just a year ago, he went on a three out of the 4 possible slams, and then following went on to win the following year the Aussie and French Open and completed 4 straight slams in a row, one of only a few players to ever do that. But as you said, Federer's been so consistent, even in these later years where you've had great players like Murray, Nadal, and Djokovic, he's still been near the top that entire time, and that's really remarkable consistency.
It really is remarkable. You know what else is remarkable? That the Toronto Argonauts are actually still a functioning franchise. 4 days after Jim Barker was fired by the team, Scott Milanovic decided he was going to resign, and he is now going to be the quarterbacks coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was been the head coach of the Argonauts since 2011, won a Grey Cup with the team in 2012, and last year had arguably his worst season ever, going 5-13, finishing at the bottom of the East. Good move for Milanovic.
I mean, you could probably make that argument because you have the Argonauts in free fall at this point. We just talked a week ago about the odd timing of firing Jim Barker when they could have fired him months ago, and obviously there seems to be some turmoil there, blowing the great opportunity they had to open in BMO Field last year. He does go to a team, though, that has also been mired in mediocrity for a long time in the Jaguars. There's some doubts now about Blake Bortles as the QB, whether or not he can be a great starting quarterback in the NFL. Maybe Milanovic can be that QB whisperer for him, though.
Well, this is the thing, and he has been a QB whisperer. I mean, he's responsible for guys like Zach Collaros, Trevor Harris, who's now an Ottawa Red Black. One thing about Milanovic is he knows how to develop quarterbacks. He has that touch. He was a quarterback himself with the Buccaneers. He's got that pedigree. And one of the things kind of trending around Twitter when this came out was make Bortles great again. And I believe that he will make Blake Bortles great. I think that he will, if he can't do it, I'm not sure anybody can. And this is a good move for Milanovic, especially considering the next GM they bring in, I'm sure is going to find their own guy.
That's true, but you have to look at also how many Canadian coaches have had, or CFL coaches rather, have had success moving from the CFL to the NFL. You have your Bud Grant, certainly, but the recent memory for me is Mark Trestman, who was considered a great quarterback coach with the Alouettes and a great head coach, obviously, with the Alouettes, and then went on to the Bears, where they hoped him and Jay Cutler would work something out. They did, I believe, made a run that first year, but a disaster after that. So that there's definitely some pressure in terms of being able to actually make that transition, because no coach has been able to do that successfully in a while out of the CFL.
This is interesting you brought up Mark Trestman, because the team actually stated a few days ago that they're nearing their search for their search for a GM is nearing a close. And I think they have somebody. I think they've got somebody in mind. I believe they had somebody in mind the whole time. And I would not be surprised, I've said this before, I would not be surprised that Jim Popp is that guy. Jim Popp had incredible success with Montreal, and if Jim Popp comes back into the fold, Mark Trestman might be in the fold as well. And Mark Trestman had incredible success with the Montreal Alouettes for years, and he could bring that degree, that winning attitude, that winning formula to Toronto. And this team, this Toronto team, has a ton of really high-level athletes. They have a ton of high-level football players that didn't get utilized in positions that they should have. A great example of that is a guy like Devin Wiley. Devin Wiley played for the Kansas City Chiefs and was utilized in special teams last year. He is an outstanding wide receiver. He's an outstanding wide receiver, but didn't get enough play at that position. A guy like Levi Noel, who is also a great Canadian product at wide receiver, didn't get a lot of play in that position. And I believe that the next coach the Toronto Argonauts see, that coach is going to utilize these players in the right positions, put them in a place where the team can be successful, and the team will be successful with the players they have right now. The exception to that is at their quarterback position. And this is where a new coach should be interesting to see what a new coach is going to do in this situation.
It'll also be interesting to see if Ricky Ray can stay healthy, as that has been a problem.
That has been a problem, and I believe that will continue to be a problem for him, unfortunately. Coming up next on The Gloves Are Off, the NHL All-Star Game. Is it a boom or is it a bust? And the Lloydminster Bobcats, having a bad season. Be back. Welcome back to The Gloves Are Off. Lance Phillips, JR, Josh Ryan, in studio with you. And let's get right to what's coming up next, which is the NHL All-Star Game, Josh. This weekend just happened, and there were some great things that happened in this All-Star Game. There was Brian Kessler's young son that went out there on the breakaway, but arguably one of the best things that people saw, and it's been viral ever since, is what you're about to see, which is Chris Pronger pinning Justin Bieber into the boards in what people are saying a hit from behind. It was a rub from behind. It wasn't a hit from behind. But this visual is probably one of the best that came from the All-Star Game. Do you think that this is a good... Do you like what this does for the game, or do you think that it's something that needs a change?
I think again, we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about the NBA All-Star Game selection. You have to either make it not a clown show, but just make it a goofy, fun thing, different from the way it works now, or you have to make it an important event, give the players incentives to play hard and give it relevancy. Otherwise, you're just caught somewhere in the middle where the true fans aren't happy and the fans who want something different aren't that happy either. That was, to me personally, the only thing that really stood out was the image of Chris Pronger laughing as Justin Bieber's face is plastered against the glass. And again, it was a rub. It wasn't a hit from behind. You look at the one thing that people were talking about more than anything over the weekend was the NFL All-Star Game doing that dodgeball game,
Right.
which has nothing to do with football essentially, but it was just such a goofy thing, and the announcers had so much fun with it. That ended up making noise more than anything in the NHL All-Star Game really did.
And this is where it's important. I think that's a great example of doing something differently that's completely away from the actual game itself, like you mentioned. And I like that it brings a different flavor for fans. I mean, leagues are consistently taking the game out of the fans' hands. They allow fan voting, but they don't want the people the fans are going to vote into the games. So if you're going to take it away from the fans' hands, you've got to give them something to be engaged in, and just having a simple game isn't enough. One thing about the NHL All-Star Game, they had some of the top 100 NHL players of all time, which was wonderful to see. I mean, that's really a great thing to see. The 3-on-3 format, I think, is far more exciting than what they've had in the past.
I do agree,
and
yes.
that's a really nice change. So they are making progress, but still, for me, the number one thing is, if this game, who is this game for? Is it for the players or for the fans? It's for the fans. Let the fans vote for who they want to vote in. I think if they want to see, and I've preached on this, if they want to see a John Scott, if you want to see John Scott, allow the people to see John Scott.
The argument with that, though, for me is that ultimately making all-star games and being an all-star factors into player contracts. They can negotiate more money going into another contract. And so from a worker's perspective, it does matter to the players.
I don't know how many agents are actually, come on.
It's
an all-star
It was
game.
a big discussion last year over the summer in the NBA summer free agency frenzy, where this guy, well, I've made 4 all-star games, this guy's only made 2, and he's getting X number of dollars. That's a big thing for the players. I'm sure fans probably don't care about that number, but for the players, it is a big deal. And so again, it goes back to, you have to just make it completely one thing or completely the other. And this in between, I don't think is good. Like you said, there's been some changes. The centennial aspect of it was pretty cool, seeing Wayne Gretzky involved. I still have a big issue with Jerome McGinley not being on that 100 player list. I think that's crazy. I think adding honestly putting all 3 Hawks players, we can argue that all day, but putting the Hawks players on that list, the current Hawks players, was just asinine to me. But regardless, they are making some changes which have been good, but they're still caught in that void where the actual game itself is not that fun to watch. And you have to either make it count for something or just make it ridiculous as possible.
You know what else hasn't been fun to watch this season? The Lloydminster Bobcats.
Oh, you don't say.
They have not been fun to watch. The Lloydminster Bobcats currently 9 wins on the season, and they're could be historically bad this season. The Lloydminster Blazers in 95-96 won 10 games. They went 10-48-2. So if the Lloydminster Bobcats over their next 14 games do not win at least 2 games, they will be tied or will be the worst Junior A hockey team in the city. Along with that, they currently have 87 goals. They're on pace to score 114 by the end of the season. The team with the fewest goals in AJHL history was Grand Prairie in 2014-2015. They scored 119. The Bobcats could own a record, a dubious distinction, where they have the fewest amount of goals over the course of a season. What does this team do from here?
All they can do is go up. All they can do is just focus on what we want to build towards for the future. We knew there was going to be a drop-off after last year where they essentially lost their entire roster, lost Gord Thibodeau. They knew there was going to be some drop-off after making the RBC final in last spring. But as you've talked about in the past, they've totally different rosters, so many inexperienced players. They've been very inefficient with their special teams, especially on the power play. And,
very inefficient is kind of an insult to very inefficient.
Perhaps. And just it really comes down to, we talked about how the Argos essentially have been in turmoil the past couple of months. By having a new coach, new GM, they really are resetting.
Right.
Maybe not by, I'm not saying to fire people per se, but just in terms of structurally how the coaches approach what they're doing, how the GM approaches what they're doing, maybe just in terms of how they recruit. It is a new group, so they can look at this season as an unfortunate awful wash and go, we need to just restart next year and have a new philosophy going forward with what we want Lloydminster Bobcat hockey to be.
I talked to Gord Thibodeau when Whitecourt was in town last week, and he said that one thing you can't teach is experience, and that makes total sense. So it's going to take some time for a team to gain that experience. But
Exactly.
at what point does the team have enough to start winning some games? I mean, they've lost 9 straight. They've won once in their last 17 games. I mean, and they're losing games that are close. They've got 2 lines basically that are able to finish right now, and I just, to me, that team is better than winning 1 game over their last 17. And maybe it's they need a little more fight in them, but you know, if you've got 2 top lines that are rolling like that, those lines have got to be being churned out one after the other to get this team some goals, because that's their biggest problem. They cannot score.
The problem is, though, again, with where they are in the standings, they don't benefit that much from getting a bunch of wins. They certainly need, I think, to get wins to A, build confidence going into next year, and B, just to see signs of progress. But they're not going. An 8-game winning streak isn't going to do much for them. I think more than anything, Coach Clayton and the rest of the squad will be looking at just, are we playing harder than we were before? Are we making sure we take care of defensive assignments? I think those things are the things that are, and obviously being efficient when you're on the power play. I think those things, along with maybe establishing top 2 lines, are the most important things to focus on for the rest of the season, and really just a full reset. That's what I said before, full reset, and just start anew going forward.
Well, that's they've got a lot to do going forward. On the other side, LeBron James. He was called a whiner by Charles Barkley. Talk about that next. Welcome back to The Gloves Are Off. Lance Phillips, Josh Ryan with you. LeBron James was called a whiner by Charles Barkley last week on TNT Basketball. And James has been the brunt of Barkley's, not joke, shall we say, but he's been the brunt of his fodder for years as he's been an analyst. And James had been stewing last couple of days about Barkley. He took James to task for a 4-time MVP, calling the Cavs out for needing to fortify the roster with another playmaker to have a realistic shot at MVP. What say you about this? What side of the fence are you on here?
Well, honestly, I can kind of play devil's advocate for both. On the one hand, LeBron basically just used a lot of facts when he responded to Charles Barkley, calling out some of his drunken escapades in the past, gambling debts. You know, he essentially just used actual historical things that happened in Barkley's past against him. On the flip side, he also said there's a new sheriff in town. Anytime anyone says there's a new sheriff in town that's anything to do with anything other than law enforcement, that always annoys me. Honestly, in terms of LeBron being a whiner, there's an argument to be said that he, even though Dan Gilbert is paying more in the luxury tax than any owner in the history of the NBA, LeBron's value is more than the $30+ million they pay him every year. I mean, the value of the franchise is shot well beyond $1 billion when he came back. Restaurant business is booming there. Like the state, not just the city of Cleveland, the state is in a better economic situation than it was prior to James coming to the state. So you could certainly argue, like, maybe you just give him whatever he wants. But the way he's done it by going out in public, calling out his teammates, including Tristan Thompson, who he helped get an $80 million deal over 4 years, which has put the Cavs in this situation, is mind-boggling. He seems to have a very passive-aggressive way of sometimes of talking about people, either taking shots on Twitter. This is the most direct he's ever been, taking shots at Phil Jackson, now taking shots at Charles Barkley. And on the one hand...
So do you let the guy have whatever he wants?
It's
It's like the baby wants candy. Okay, give her candy.
On the one hand, I mean, I personally don't like this relationship that LeBron and the management and the media have. I personally would rather see him just, play hard. I know he plays a lot of minutes, but play hard defense once in a while before you criticize the rest of your teammates for being poor or criticize management. Maybe play championship-level defense.
But he's not criticizing the team for being poor. He's saying that the team needs a couple more pieces for them to repeat. And that's legit. That team is a good team, but the Golden State Warriors got that much better last season with adding Kevin Durant to the mix. They do need another couple of players to really fortify the team, and I don't think he's wrong there. One thing I do think he's wrong about is when he said that Charles Barkley, he said to Charles Barkley, "I'm not going to let him disrespect my legacy." Like, what does that mean? Who says that kind of stuff? Oh, the guy who says that is the guy who holds an actual televised broadcast to choose what team he's going for.
Not to mention when he left Miami, called Pat Riley, made him fly to Vegas to visit him, didn't look at him while talking to him for an entire hour. Riley flies back, and then he announces he's leaving the next day.
Yeah, I do believe that LeBron James is a bit of a whiner, but LeBron James is not a guy that just goes about his business. Yeah. He should be a guy who just goes out there and plays basketball, and he doesn't do it.
And that's fair. I think as much as you said, having one more piece would help, having, say, something like a Lance Stevenson or a Mario Chalmers, just someone to come off the bench and spot a few minutes, handle the ball a little bit, would help this team. But the Golden State Warriors, when they got Kevin Durant, they essentially gave up their bench. They have a couple of key pieces off the bench, like Sean Livingston, who's a pretty good playmaker, and they've had some surprises like JaVale McGee, but ultimately, they're not deeper than the Warriors, and they've been managing just fine with their 4 guys. Warriors have Kevin Love, Kyrie Irving. Tristan Thompson has turned out to be a pretty good player. So, again, while that extra piece could help, and I think it will help, I just saw an announcement today that they're actually trying out a couple of different players at that point guard position. Kirk Heinrich, who's been out of the game a little bit, 36, but a pretty good playmaker, played steady defense and beat teams like the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets before you start complaining about needing another player.
Do they repeat? Yes or no?
No.
No, they don't repeat.
No,
really?
unless someone breaks Kevin Durant or Steph Curry's ankle, I think the Warriors are going to take it again.
Yeah, they're repeating, no question. Fair or foul after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Gloves Are Off. Fair or foul? And we're just doing one this time around. And it is the Atlanta Falcons will win Super Bowl 51. Josh Ryan, what do you say? Fair or foul?
With no real confidence, but foul.
Come on.
How can you, bet against the Pats? Every single year they do the most with the absolute least. And even though they have no Gronk, and they've dumped a bunch of guys who people thought were still a year or two of their prime left. They're still dominant. Brady's ageless, it seems, even though the deep ball has declined a little bit. And they just showed you what they did against the Steelers. They totally dominated Ben Roethlisberger. And
they're pretty good.
I can see them doing the same thing, double teaming Julio Jones and giving them no shot.
But Matt Ryan has had a historically good season. He's got Julio Jones. He's got Sanu. He's got Devonta Freeman. He's got so many weapons. I just don't believe that this year, and the defense is being underestimated. That defense is good.
That's fair.
The defense is that is fair. You know what else is fair is that they're probably going to win the Super Bowl.
You know what else is fair? The Pats have Bill Belichick. And he's the one coach in the league who's considered an advantage compared to every other coach.
I think we just used the term fair like 4 times in the last 10 seconds.
That's probably true.
Listen, we've got some fun stuff coming your way on The Gloves Are Off. Our Valentine's Day show, that's going to be fun.
Yes.
What are you going to dress like?
I'm going to keep it a surprise.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I will too. That should be some fun. And a week, 2 weeks away, we've got a new set. We're changing up the set. We're changing up the look of the show. We're going to have some fun with it. Are you excited about that?
I'm very excited about it. I think it'll be a nice new look, and we'll be able to give you some better content as well.
Yeah, it's going to be great. We're going to have some heavy local guests. It's going to be a lot of fun. For Josh Ryan, I am Lance Phillips. Thanks for watching The Gloves Are Off.